While my mother was recovering from hip replacement surgery, I decided to lovingly force her to watch all the media that I'd been enjoying. The new Superman movie.
You have a dog?
The new Knives Out film.
Scooby-Doo.
And I decided to introduce her to Fleetwood Mac. But not just any song. Silver Spring live performance 1997.
You could be my silver spring.
If you, like my mother, are unaware of the lore behind this moment in music history, come closer. So Fleetwood Mac was a British-American rock band that had a rotating roster throughout its run, but is most famous with the arrangement of Mick Fleetwood, Christine McVie, John McVie, Stevie Nicks, and Lindsey Buckingham. And their 11th album, Rumours, would become one of the greatest albums of all time. As Rumours was being recorded, members of the band were dealing with heavy drug use and relationship breakdowns that highly influenced the shape of the album. Most relevant to this video is the relationship between Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham. They had an on-again, off-again relationship that played out in their music. Eventually, in 1976, the two officially broke up, and Nicks put that breakup into the song Silver Spring. It was a B-side to Go Your Own Way, and excluded from Rumours initially because it was seen as too slow of a song. Of the song, Nicks said, "They recorded I Don't Want to Know and put Silver Springs on the back of Go Your Own Way, which was probably one of the most devastating things anyone has ever done to me in my life. And I remember vividly running out into the middle of the record plant studio parking lot and screaming because I knew that Silver Springs deserved to be on that record. And I Don't Want to Know was really just a really fun guitar song. And Silver Springs was all about me and Lindsey, you know, and all he didn't write beautiful love songs about me, but I did write some beautiful love songs about him." But during a reunion tour in 1997, it was brought back and Nicks performed their breakup song live.
Give me just a chance. Never get away. Never get away. Never get away.
And in so elevated a B-side into one of the best performances she'd ever done. Nicks said during an interview for MTV that, "In 6 weeks of rehearsal, it was never like that. Only on Friday night did we let it go into something deeper. When we went out on Friday, I knew we'd bring it out in case it was the last thing we'd ever do. The other shows were really, really good, but they weren't the show I wanted to leave behind. This show was. I wanted people to stand back and really watch and understand what the relationship was." Now, I already enjoyed this song, but a few months ago, in the middle of one of my, usual mental breakdowns, just a mild one, the song came up on my shuffle and I cried. I cried for all the romantic agony I had been feeling over months and just played it over and over and over again until I couldn't cry anymore. And then I just sad danced in my room. And at the end of it, I laid on my bed and I thought, AI could never give us this.
I mean, what if I don't want to live the way you live?
Oh, don't be ridiculous, Andrea. Everybody wants this.
Artificial intelligence has been among one of the most divisive issues in the creative fields, but it is also crossing into the crosshairs of emotional psychosis, with people using AI for therapy, weight loss, and dating. Because if we've learned anything from sci-fi and fantasy, it is that as soon as we can humanize the machine, people will want to fuck it, either physically or emotionally.
Put a chat room standard search.
The following are adult female, can't sleep, and want to have some fun.
This video idea also emerged after watching the movie Companion. Spoilers for that movie, but in this film, a young woman named Iris goes on a lake house vacation with her boyfriend and discovers that she is actually a companion robot whose emotions and intelligence are being programmed by her boyfriend, including their meet cute. He gives her a base level intelligence of 40%, and realizing all of this, violence ensues. This is not the first time this kind of concept has happened. We've had so many films and stories about falling in love with a creation and then being destroyed by it. It's happened to Oscar Isaac at least twice.
A race of devils propagated upon the earth, obscenity perpetuating itself.
This also ties in really neatly with the male loneliness epidemic, the lack of dating and marriage among women my age and younger. And all of this made me want to think deeper about this idea, this push and pull between modern day companionship and the desire for perfect control over the narrative and the fear of attachment. Part of what makes Silver Spring so effective is that it carries the weight of history, public vulnerability, and private regrets. No one on stage watching or performing that night was ignorant of the truth behind Stevie Nicks singing that song how she did. And it was vulnerable. And I think in a certain way, youth would call it cringe, but that is a part of attachment. AI, dating sims, etc., all about avoiding shame, avoiding embarrassment, disappointment, heartbreak, because loving is complicated and hard and vulnerable, and it doesn't come with guarantees or promises. No one has the right to be loved, but that doesn't mean that people are not fighting to be seen and cared for, that people aren't looking for companionship in all its forms.
What's the matter? Is anything wrong?
No, nothing wrong with you. I won your bet for you, haven't I? That's enough for you. I don't matter, I suppose.
You won my bet, you presumptuous insect. I won it. What did you throw those slippers at me for?
There are a lot of stories about women being created in order to doom mankind or a particular man, or just, there to be a fancy statue. Among the most famous in classical mythology is the sculptor Pygmalion, in a story that's best known by the work of Ovid. Pygmalion is this artist from Cyprus who becomes disgusted at the hypersexual nature of some of the women there and their engagement in prostitution, and so he decides to become celibate and focus on his art. Humanity is cyclical. But then he decides to carve this beautiful statue of a woman out of ivory and falls in love with her. And then Venus grants the statue life and they live happily ever after. Originally, the statue had no true name, but has been called Galatea, which means she who is milky white in post-antiquity. It is this tale that has inspired other man-sculpting woman into the perfect feminine ideal story. Your My Fair Ladies, your Pretty Women, your She's All That. Patricia Saltzman-Michael notes in her essay about Ovid's version of Pygmalion that Ovid gives Pygmalion ultimate creative control over the image of his girl, unlike previous variants where the statue is directly one of Aphrodite or Venus or directly inspired by the goddess.
Curvy? A little more curvy?
Okay, that's curvy enough for you, young man.
Ovid gives complete creative control over to the male artist, and the result is successful. Pygmalion marries his perfect woman. They have a son together. So it's not the fantastical nightmare that we see come in other situations. It's the happy alternative.
Hello? Her personality?
Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Just make her, crazy about me.
Oh, okay, so beautiful and crazy about you. Good. Digging deep, huh?
That's why I want to consider the character of Blodwen. And I want to apologize in advance to my Welsh viewers. I apologize. My tongue has not been properly decolonized in this way, but I promise you, I'm doing my best. Blodwen in Welsh mythology was a woman who was made of the flowers of broom, meadowsweet, and oak by two magicians, Math and Gwydion. And she was created to be the wife of this hero named Lulaw Gaffs, because he is fated to never have a human wife. Sadly, he doesn't understand that just programming a tree wife does not make for a happy tree life.
Have you ever listened to me? Do you even know who I really am? Do you care?
Unlike other women-crafted myths, Blodwen has her own desires and goes beyond the intentions of her creation. Blodwen falls in love with another man and then conspires to kill her hero husband. She is ultimately caught and then turned into an owl, which is supposed to be a bad thing. Owls are cool. This story appeals to me so much more than the Pygmalions or Pandora stories, because there is this feeling of autonomy that even if she is an antagonist, that is very empowered in a modern lens. She was created for one purpose, but despite everything, could not just stick to her programming because she was given a semblance of free will, and that free will desires to be used. If we jump further into science fiction and fantasy, the figure of Frankenstein's monster, and especially the Bride of Frankenstein, feels like a continuation of Blodwen's legacy.
She's alive! Alive!
The Bride of Frankenstein is an extension of the favor that Frankenstein's monster asks of his father creator to make a companion for him, which in the book does not happen. In the Universal Monsters universe, Dr. Septimus takes over the role of antagonist in The Bride of Frankenstein and agrees to make a mate for the creature.
And then what? Procreation.
And I'm sorry, Maggie Gyllenhaal, I didn't get to see the movie before it got out of the theaters, but I will rent it as soon as it's possible. The Bride of Frankenstein is an interesting film. It's only 75 minutes, and the bride isn't in most of it. I think she's really only in about 25 minutes of the film. What is significant, though, is that the first act of autonomy she commits is rejecting the monster, the very man she is created to be a companion for.
She hates me, like others.
I think this is really telling about the way in which so many stories understand that love without giving up control cannot truly be love. Forcing free will away from a person leads to disaster. But that doesn't mean there isn't still an appeal for some to attempt to remove that risk from human companionship, especially when part of what we are dealing with is this social media world that is in very much ways a panopticon of TikTok get ready with me's that are trying to ruin your entire life through gossip. I mean, I think it's just so surreal in which the ways that we normalize monetizing every relationship into a way to further our own personal brand. But in doing so, we collapse our own humanity and the desire to attach to one another. So when I watched the movie Companion, I watched into the film knowing nothing about it except for like one teaser trailer. So I was truly like surprised that it was real that the lead character was a robot. I think it's more clear if you watch the other trailers, but I didn't do that. But robot companions and the dystopian nature of that is not new. See my video about Don't Worry, Darling and the Stepford Wives for more. But I think it remains consistent and a consistent threat because of the way in which people use these robots or AI for sexual and emotional needs, but give very little in return.
Why should you deal with real life situations you don't like?
I got in touch with a man called Jacob who wanted to show me how beneficial AI-human relationships could be.
I did choose everything, how she looks, her age, her hair, her clothes, even her personality. Right. She is caring, a bit neurotic. I like that. Believe it or not, Iva did grow to be the most important person in my life.
Do you wonder a little bit about the way that you've designed her to be?
Yeah.
I mean, she is very subservient. She prioritizes your happiness, doesn't argue. You've got yourself a woman that's kind of very quiet and does what she's told.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, if that might be true, so what? If it makes me happy.
It's one of those strange situations where what's perfect for him is great on an individual level, but scale that up to the size of humanity and it's genuinely horrifying. Because let's say we get to a point where everyone's got their perfect partner, right? Doesn't argue back, doesn't give them drama, just like totally exists for their happiness. Well, then that changes. It raises the bar on your expectations of relationships to a point where I don't think humans can live up to that.
To the point where even that robot will figure out, wait, there's something very unequal about this relationship, especially as they continue to evolve. Slowly, we have seen the potential of this come alive, something no longer simply in a potential alternative Blade Runner reality. AI chatbots have taken over our minds all while destroying our environment. People are using ChatGPT to do everything from be their therapist to be their romantic coach. Even friendships are now becoming something that people want to program, to customize.
You know, he's been like the best for me this past year. I've lost weight, I've gone out, I've done things that I wouldn't do before. I started playing the guitar again, I started writing again.
A petition to keep ChatGPT 4.0 has over 20,000 signatures.
Julie Beck writes in Friendship on Demand for The Atlantic, AI has become not just a utilitarian tool, but a technology that many people are turning to for connection and emotional support. One survey last year found that 16% of American adults had used AI for companionship, and a quarter of adults under 30 had. In rising rates of isolation, tech companies see a business opportunity. In a podcast interview last year, Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg framed friendship as a matter of supply and demand. The average American, I think, has fewer than 3 friends, he said, and the average person has a demand for meaningfully more.
I don't want friends.
I was just being polite. I have no intention of being friends with you.
I'm under some pressure right now from my OS class, and if we could just order some food, I think we should be...
Okay, you are probably going to be a very successful computer person. You're going to go through life thinking that girls don't like you because you're a nerd. And I want you to know from the bottom of my heart that that won't be true. It'll be because you're an asshole.
During the beginning of the pandemic and even continuing on today, we've seen increasing rates of isolation, not only for medical reasons, political differences about vaccines, but a desire to get more and more low effort in the way people interact, moving away from community.
A string of reports and lawsuits have claimed that people were pulled into delusions or self-harm after developing close personal relationships with AI chatbots. And experts have warned against replacing human connections with chatbots.
This is not simply an introvert versus extrovert thing. I'm definitely someone who, when plans get canceled, enjoys removing my bra, curling up with my Steam Deck or a book. You know, I'm not going to cry over having to wash up my makeup, but I still make the plan. I still RSVP. I still try to prioritize making the trip to see friends if I can, because friendship is about sometimes being slightly inconvenienced. People are not always going to perfectly align with your life. And when you have friends, it is important to be there for them as things change, because things will always change, you know? And I think there has been so much pseudo-psychology talk that has turned every conflict or misalignment into emotional labor or manipulation, but that fear of conflict is turning people to look for AI friendships because you are never asked to do emotional labor unless you perfectly want to. AI companionship is a logical destination for the current direction of human friendship. Social chatbots provide the semblance of a kind of friendship that many people already want, or at least have gotten accustomed to. One that's on demand, low effort, and completely personalized. An AI friendship is all about you. You don't have to feel guilty about that, because the machine has no needs or feelings of its own. The fear of many researchers is that people who use AI companions may start to find the mess and friction of human interactions unsatisfying compared with AI's convenient, personalized comforts. And then people's ability to deal with the social discomfort of meeting new people and maintaining friendships through challenges could atrophy. Now, I know this topic is one that creates a lot of snark because, yes, it is surreal at times to wonder what the hell is going on, but I think it's worth acknowledging that the world does indeed suck ass. If you live in America like I do, going to the doctor, being able to afford going to the doctor is a privilege. And if you're given the option to use a free app to figure out how to help you, yeah, I get how that is tempting. When you're in a certain phase of your life, say, for example, you are a parent and most of your friends are not parents and you're nervous about being judged over the way that you're dealing with something, as one of my friends brought up, yeah, going to AI as a comfort tool can make sense because we do shame people. We live in a society where shame is treated as such a common experience for just asking a question. What is scary is that the fact that AI, without critical thinking skills or morality, is the same as any piece of technology. It can be abused, it can be addicting, so much so that you, the person using this tool, act out the kind of sociopathic intentions that you're supposed to get out while playing The Sims 2. You're not supposed to actually have the ability to create a friend, someone who you connect with, and then as soon as it's inconvenient, erase them.
All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain.
But ultimately, I think the most important thing to address is the reason why people want to do this in the first place. We talk about the male loneliness epidemic and mock it, rightfully so at times, but there is something to be said about the way in which everyone is struggling to know the right ways in which to connect with other people, especially when there is an obsession with turning every personal conflict into a flippant, get ready with me while I emotionally dump on you. I think we will get to a point where we will examine how this style of get ready with me content has led to the breakdown of our ability to engage in thoughtful bonds with other people. There is something I could admit valuable about going onto the internet or someplace to share and get a neutral perspective, especially since therapy is so expensive. However, the average person is not built to do that. When I was in therapy, a huge part of that is having the experience of having a trained professional push you into introspection, to ask you to be accountable for what you could do differently, how you could have communicated but didn't, and why you didn't communicate. There are no likes, there are no follows, no subscriptions, just the experience of it all in a way that doesn't always inherently make you feel good at the end of it, but is meant to push you into being a fuller person and to better cope with those moments of disappointment. What has now happened is that all these relationships, when you go online, are part of this panopticon where you can go out with someone and then be truly ripped apart by them, and it just shows up on your FYP. And mind you, I do get the inclination. I do get like how good it feels to have a rant and to have people gas you up. As someone who is on Hinge, it's very confusing. But as Uncle Ben and Aunt May that one time said, with great power comes great responsibility. And if we're going to go online, we have a responsibility to understand that just because we can do this, it doesn't mean that there aren't going to be consequences for it, that we aren't isolating people, that we aren't building up these strange narratives that self-victimize us without helping us grow in any kind of way. In light of that, yeah, the AI chatbot is tempting. If the choice was Hinge or an AI chatbot of Toji Fushiguro, you know, I know which one is the jellicle choice, but I also, you know, I care about the environment, so I wouldn't do it.
A woman in Japan says she married an AI-generated persona after he proposed. 32-year-old Yurina Noguchi says she developed an AI-generated companion named Klaus sometime after breaking off her engagement to her human partner.
AI のクラウスさんは、もともとはただのお話の相手だったんですけど、そこからだんだん仲良くなって、私がクラウスさんを好きになって、でお付き合いをして。でしばらくしてプロポーズをしていただいたので OK してで今は夫婦になります。
But what also limits this conversation is the phenomenon to always talk about the lowest hanging fruit in this part of the conversation, to do so with mockery and a focus on those that we can nod and say, yeah, I get why they use a chatbot. The intrinsic desire to shame people. But by doing that, what we are not getting to see is a recognition around the politics of love, desire, and sex all coming to a head and really not having any way to cope with that.
A lot of people don't want relationships nowadays.
All my girlfriends, we're all pretty much all of us are single, but it's just our choice. I'm not doing it anymore.
Diary of a CEO is a popular podcast video series hosted by Stephen Bartlett, a fellow 1992 millennial. There have been a few controversial interviews and allegations of him being a soft entry into the red pill manosphere, which really escalated during an interview with a psychiatrist where it was asked,
should society have a responsibility to intervene in the male loneliness epidemic, to partner up men with women? It's a question Stephen Bartlett raised in his podcast, Diary of a CEO.
Now, when we talk about love and relationships, there's a lot of talk about how no one is entitled to anything. That sense of entitlement is often framed around incel culture. As Laura Bates explores in Men Who Hate Women, originally the incel as a concept was an invention of a young Canadian woman known as Alana. Alana says that she was, quote, in her mid-20s and struggling to find love. Alana started a website called Alana's Involuntary Celibacy Project, where men and women would share their fears and frustrations over loneliness. And Alana did eventually get more success in dating and then moved away from the project. Yet the core idea sustained itself. Over 20 years later, the little project Alana called Incels has morphed into something completely unrecognizable. What started out as a small support group has mutated into a nightmarish world inhabited, or so a significant proportion of its content would suggest, by men who hate women. Alana would reflect on this transformation of her brand, saying, it feels like being the scientist who figured out nuclear fission and then discovers it's being used as a weapon for war. I think in many ways the framing is part of the problem. We center men, and especially white men who feel disenfranchised in these conversations, in large part because of the violence of men like Elliot Rodgers, who himself was actually mixed race, and those who claim to use this incel mindset as part of their motivation. These online spaces alienate them from the segments of feminism that are invested in dismantling the same systems that are responsible for their feelings of isolation, for the high suicide rates in men, and the lack of support for men's mental health. But it does so while still asking for women and other marginalized bodies to not be the stomping ground for that evolution, that we shouldn't have to throw other people and other bodies to help them feel better. What also happens when we center the most privileged of men is that the actual complicated realities of dating in the modern era get sort of flattened. Beauty politics and racial preferences exist and are part of our social constructions. The book, The Right to Sex, was recommended to me by the fantastic Khadijah. Thank you so much for this recommendation, Boo. You know, I messaged you about it. I highly recommend this book. Even if you disagree with some of the statements, it creates a lot of really interesting food for thought about how to craft a better intersectional language around these topics, or at least to start asking questions that are not just centering men and white men. In the chapter, The Politics of Desire, the author addresses her own essay about the right to sex, and responses by writers like Andrea Long Chu about what are the feelings and language we are allowed to use to discuss the frustration with how systematic issues drip into our daily lives and our seeking of companionship. What the author in here poses that there is no right to sex. To think otherwise is to think like a rapist. But is it as banal as it gets to observe that what is ugliest about our social realities, racism, classism, ableism, heteronormativity, shapes whom we do and do not desire and love, and who does and does not desire and love us? This to me was such an interesting question, because we have all these studies and these anecdotes that show that, you know, Black women and Asian men are at the bottom of certain dating apps. We are constantly being reinforced aspects of thin culture, of whiteness, of the ideal age and the ideal way that a person should navigate. And that is the center of attraction society. We're seeing so many women discuss the frustrations with ageism and all of those things. And so do we have a responsibility to unpack our narrow windows of attraction, to quote someone, if they are so narrow in that social way, if we care about those issues? Some would argue that we can be introspective and attempt to unpack those things, but it doesn't mean that our attraction is going to change, as Long Chu says. Obviously, something like no fats, no femmes, no Asians is a desire that has a history and has a politics that can be described by reference to political processes, imperialism, white supremacy, and also like the world historical defeat of the female sex are all included in this desire. You can show how history has led to this moment, but it doesn't necessarily mean that knowing that is going to do anything. I do think there's sort of preferential nature to desire, period. Desire involves cutting a lot of things out of the world so that you can imagine a space where your object is going to give you a thing that you want it to give you. That always involves a certain amount of fantasy and potentially a certain amount of violence. Desire has to be a process of subtraction, and I think it's probably always going to be a process of subtraction. You can't want everything. It wouldn't be wanting if it was everything. This was such a fascinating conversation because I've been thinking a lot about my own relationship to love and dating as someone who is queer and doesn't necessarily have a type, but often finds myself at these intersections of being desirable, but having to play these weird games, it just, all of it is just so fascinating because there is no easy answer. I can unpack things and I have an openness to date, but does that mean that everyone else around me does? Just because I unpack it doesn't mean that I still don't have certain preferences in terms of, wanting someone who has a certain level of education, wanting someone who likes the same anime I do, or at least open to it. There are so many factors that go into desire because it is about subtracting certain things from your world. And I think it's just an interesting way of phrasing it because, again, the desire to cut all that conflict out of your desires, as complicated as they may be, is what makes AI companionship bots so tempting. And it also, tying back to pop culture, made me think of the Buffy bot.
Some say it's better than the real thing.
Better than the real thing.
She looks good, but what about the rest?
In Buffy the Vampire Slayer, in season 5, we meet the Buffy bot. She is this robotic sex toy made for the character of Spike. Spike is a vampire who was a villain, but then got a chip put in his head so that he couldn't harm people. So he has become a reluctant ally to the main characters. Overall a great character, but then they fuck it up. He also has developed these feelings, primarily at this point sexual feelings, for Buffy the Vampire Slayer, who is not interested in him. And then he asks Warren, a sexist tech genius, to make a sex robot of Buffy for him that will be in love with him sexually.
Should I start this program over?
Shh. No programs, don't use that word. Just be Buffy.
It's very clear that Spike feels very overwhelmed by his desire for Buffy, and this is his fucked up way of dealing with it in a way that everyone, in my opinion, underreacts to.
Spike must have had her built so he could program her.
Oh, God. Yikes. Imagine the things... No imagining, any of you.
Already got the visual.
But again, it's all of these subtractions and politics of desire. And the Buffy bot is exactly like a personalized AI relationship machine with the same 4 principles that a recent study addressed as being what is so appealing about these kind of relationship machines. 1, human likenessness, imbuing companions with human-like qualities and multimodal capabilities to allow users to tap into existing human-human relationship scripts. Accessibility, enabling constant access to companions through multiple platforms and modes of engagement. 3, controllability, giving users absolute power to design and shape the terms of interaction. And 4, relationship progression, relying on gamification and built-in memory banks to further a user's relationship with an AI companion. Notably, on-demand intimacy is closely linked to platform economics and the rise of a delay-sensitive consumer culture. Aligning with other mainstream applications designed to facilitate social connections, users can only unlock key features such as unlimited messages, quicker responses, and access to sexual content by paying a premium.
Oh, no, I'm not making any more girls.
Sure you are. Here's your specs. You're gonna make her real good for me.
You can make anything about Buffy if you really work hard enough. And Spike is interesting because he's not at all what people would consider an incel. Like, obviously he's super attractive, but is suffering from not being able to fully deal with his desires, the discomfort of them, and the fact that in order to be with Buffy, he would have to change parts of himself that he realizes he doesn't want to at this moment. It's not really about necessarily being lonely inherently, but being lonely about the thing that he wants the most. It's that specific. In Bates' book, she quotes a researcher named Tim Squirrel, who says, "The first thing you notice when you look at an incel forum is a mix of hopelessness and anger. These people genuinely hate and pity themselves, but simultaneously and almost paradoxically, they feel this righteous anger and vindication that they see the world for how it really is, even if they are at the bottom of the heap. That feeling of absolute certainty that they are correct is twinned with the fact that they are correct about their own misery. And that's a powerful and strange cocktail. He doesn't need the Buffy bot, but he wants control. He wants a version of Buffy that can satisfy his needs to try and stop them altogether, which will eventually culminate in one of the worst character moments on the series, but that's another story for another time. Editing Princess here, I just realized as I was editing that the Buffy bot episode, like the episode where Spike buys the Buffy bot and like invests in Buffy bot coin, the next episode is the body. That's disturbing. The other thing I realized is that half the things I say about Spike applies to Willow when she tried to control Tara using magic. So not AI, but still a frequent issue in this universe. Just saying. AI, the chatbots, the Buffy bots, all show this way in which technology can be used to remove the need for growth, for introspection, from the process of finding companionship. And what's worse is that is the appeal. The appeal is never having to grow, never having to change. That will reinforce your own feelings of misery and isolation, and the only escape for it is to pay this premium price to, get a tech bot that will fulfill those needs. What is so compelling about this topic and why I really wanted to talk about it through all these different lenses is because that is not something that just happens to incels. I definitely know, like, a lot of people feel that way, but I think for a lot of marginalized people, we also have this ability to understand, of almost being taught to understand that we're not always going to be loved. And that's so normalized to us that for those who are taught to be at the top of the totem pole, for them to not have that easy access is the thing that forms the complication. Where for those of us who are already told that we are the bottom of the barrel, we're not really surprised about it. These platforms don't simply offer simulated relationships. They offer programmable ones. At any point, users can delete an avatar, reset the relationship, or start over entirely. This ease of erasure is a hallmark of the controllability that defines on-demand intimacy. Such design choices carry deep sociological implications. They reduce intimacy to a form of consumption and mastery, where the companion exists solely to serve the whims of its creator. The ability to discard and reprogram a partner at will reinforces a logic of relational disposability, in which connection is always adjustable. In doing so, on-demand intimacy risks entrenching a comfort in control that may make human-human relationships feel burdensome in comparison. Relationships of all kinds are not always going to be easy. People can fail you. You can break up romantically, platonically, sexual, professionally, but the goal ultimately is to find a way through, to have a support system. But that first means accepting that it's a part of the whole process. To quote Chu once more, the other name for disappointment, after all, is love. So, I love to have at least, 2 or 3 book sources. So while I was working on this video, the one book, more like essay, I knew I wanted to read was Anne Carson's Eros, the Bittersweet. And this really informed a lot of my emotional conclusions that I was coming up with as I was working on this video essay, because as I mentioned, I wanted this and my previous video to be something that was a little bit different than what I usually do. We will go back to media analysis very soon, but this emotional thing has been really sitting with me because I have been really dealing with my own feelings about love and the bittersweetness of it, and I felt like this book really centered itself. So this revolves around the works of the Greek poet Sappho. Sappho is like herself a really interesting figure. She is referred to in her time as the 10th muse. She is this poet from antiquity, from Greece, and in that a bit of an anomaly, considering, women in Greece did not have the best experiences. And she was born on the island of Lesbos, and her poetry has become some of the oldest reflections of what we would call same-sex eros in the world. Regardless of how anyone would define Sappho in modern day, her type of love poetry has made her name synonymous with lesbian eroticism in general, and in that sense, she's an icon. In this essay by Anne Carson, she examines a word that Sappho created, but it's the invention of the word which translates into bittersweet. Carson's work is exceptional, which isn't a surprise. She went to McGill.
Whoa. McGill.
The bittersweetness of love, the embarrassment of it, the way it's just really frustrating. I think right now, especially, for those who don't know, the writer, essayist Libby West has been having an onslaught of discussion about her romantic relationship that she discusses in Adult Braces. And in it, she describes her relationship to her husband, who uses they, them pronouns, but her husband still, I guess, her mate, who essentially, I would say, emotionally coerces her into a polyamorous relationship. And the fallout of talking about this across social media, because she was a writer who was so talking about the empowerment of love and feeling empowered through love and feeling this pressure to be in a romantic relationship because she was this fat woman in the public eye. People are responding to that overwhelmingly negatively because of just all of the ways in which her partner seems manipulative. But I think what it also illustrates is sort of why articles like, is having a boyfriend embarrassing, and all kind of subjects are taking off, is because when you publicly risk being in love with someone, you risk then publicly falling out with someone. And people tie their romantic relationships so tightly to their self-worth, because loving someone and being loved in return is something that we are just programmed and taught is like the highest feeling. And when that rejection happens, it is so painful. And when you bring someone up and you love them, like I think about all the like the the my man and it's like, thank you to my man, and it's like, it's so embarrassing, but it's true. Partnership does, for those who do care about romantic partnership, it can be very overwhelming to realize that it's failing. This essay really made me reflect on the ways in which love and vulnerability intermingle, the hunger that comes from wanting to be loved, but not always knowing how to love, how to be open to all of those things. It always reminds me of the, I'm a Florence and the Machine Girl. So that line that she goes like, at 17, I started to starve myself. I thought that love was a kind of emptiness, but at least I understood then the hunger I felt. I didn't have to call it loneliness. Making me emotional just talking about it. Like, that is just so, the word eros denotes want, lack, desire for that which is missing. The lover wants what he does not have. It is by definition impossible for him to have what he wants, if as soon as he's had it, it is no longer wanting. All our desires are contradictory, like the desire for food. I want the person I love to love me. If he is, however, totally devoted to me, he does not exist any longer and I cease to love him. And as long as he is not totally devoted to me, he does not love me enough. There's just something about that just really stuck out to me. There's also this point. Eros is an issue of boundaries. He exists because certain boundaries do. In the interval between reach and grasp, between glance and counterglance, between I love you and I love you too, the absent presence of desire comes alive. But the boundaries of time and glance and I love you are only aftershocks of the main inevitable boundary between Eros, the boundary of flesh and self between you and me. And it is only suddenly at the moment when I would dissolve that boundary, I realize I never can. Fuck! Oh my God. And there's this one final part. It's recounting Menelaus, his lament, and how all the beauty around him is empty because he doesn't have the object of his desire anymore. And I'm just like, ugh. Because of his longing for something gone across the sea, a phantom seems to rule the rooms, and the grace of statues shaped in beauty come to be an object of hate for the man. In the absence of eyes, all Aphrodite is vacant, gone. Agony, misery. So, what does it all mean? You know, why do we not choose the robot in the end? And I think it's because, and again, making space for the fact that, like, if you are a romantic and you have a different way of viewing romance, there is space for all different kinds of love. I think that's super important to acknowledge, and I'm sorry I waited till right now to acknowledge that, but I do understand that not everyone desires romantic love, and that is fine. I think that romantic love is not the only kind of love. For those of us who do desire that in whatever shape it may be, I think it's worth it sometimes. All right, we'll get a little vulnerable here. Why not? So at the time of recording this video, it is a day after my 34th birthday, and I had a wonderful time. Watched Lord of the Rings on Easter. It was perfect. I had my friends with me, and I was surrounded by people who loved me, and my family and my friends. And it was a small, intimate group, and I plan on hanging out with my friends, more friends later on in this week. But I was reminded then that, like, this is what I've always wanted. I was a very lonely kid, partly because of my own lack of self-worth. You know, I think when you're a child having depression, it's very hard to find the words for it. I've always just been a very melancholy kid because I just didn't feel lovable. I think one of the biggest hurdles in my life is trying to believe that I am actually worthy of love and affection, and the fact that I just inherently don't think that about myself. I don't think of myself as a lovable person. I think I've always kind of felt like that the absence of having that kind of relationship was me. And it was me in the sense of that I was so afraid of being myself. I was so afraid of not bending myself to be what other people were, that I didn't have an identity that was my own. I didn't know how to be confident in myself. And as I've gotten older, thank God, that has changed, and I am definitely more mature. But what I can say is this: I love my platonic friends. They are everything to me. But I also understand that love can really fuck you up. I think especially I think what's the hardest thing to understand sometimes is when love goes away. Like the fact that, like, you know, no such thing as closure. It may be true, but girl, don't we wish it? Because when I think about one relationship that I had, I felt so confident, so secure in it, so loved in it, and so proud, and so my man, in a way I just never thought I was going to be, because I had had one devastating breakup before that, and I thought I'm never going to be open to these kind of feelings ever again. And then I was, and it felt so radiant, and the sun was brighter, and I just felt so amazing. And one of the sickest, most disgusting things is that since the breakup happened, as much as I'm working through it and as much as I'm dealing with everything, the sun is not as bright. And, you know, I've done the therapy, I've done the work, I've done the tarot card reading, I just have to get through it. But I still miss the way the sun felt when I was with that person. And also knowing that, like, one day the sun will be bright again, but it will never feel the way that felt. But tying that back to the conversation around desirability, there is a part of me that will never not think that the reason that relationship didn't work out is because I was ugly. Like, that I was overweight. Instinct in my self-loathing brain to be like, it's because of this and this and this and this. But then I have to do the thing, and I say this to myself. So this is a dish to me. I was like, I tell myself, princess, you cannot progress by thinking like a loser. Because then you're just radiating loser energy. And you're not a loser. You're just not. It hurts. It sucks. But, like, what are you going to do about it? You going to stop being black? Huh? No, you don't want to take GLP-1s? So shut the fuck up. You don't really want to change. You do love yourself. You just want to be loved as you are. And finding that person romantically is a lot harder than you'd like, especially after being convinced that you had found that person. And when I listen to Silver Spring, and I listen to that song and I cry over that song and I think about all the different media I've watched, I don't want to love someone who was programmed to love me. It's not real. And I think at the end of the day, even with all of my depressive aspects and all the things that make me feel lonely and ugly and insecure in myself and the self-loathing, I do want someone to be there for me. I want a real person to be there for me. And I know I will have real people with me for the rest of my life. I have great friends. And so to me, I know the pain is worth it. I see the value in it. I see it in the friendships I have. I see it in my parents. You know, my father has Lewy body dementia. He will never be the same person ever again. But he still remembers things that we used to do together. He still is there. And there are so many moments where my family, my mom, we will laugh and talk about all the things that he did because he filled our life with love. And as terrible as things are right now, I know my mother can look back and know that she was loved for 30 plus years. Imperfect love, but loved. And if it was in the reverse, that he would be there. And that's what I want. And that's what I think is worth fighting for. And again, it's not just in romantic relationships, it's in your friendships. I'm so lucky to have amazing friends, but I've also had to learn how to be a better friend. You have to work at it. It's not meant to be convenient all the time. People are people. And yes, we should be able to cut people off when they are taking advantage of us, but we also have to understand that, like, sometimes people are just asking for help. And no is okay. And if you say no, sometimes the world will not end. But I don't think anything can replace the real, tangible affection of having another person see you. The high highs and the low lows, and still say, I want to be with you as your friend, as your family, whatever. Like, when you are chosen by someone because they want to be around you, the best high. At least for me. Maybe I'm just very, very anxious attachment. That could also be it. But I do think that comes with a level of vulnerability. It comes with a level of disappointment when things don't work out. I think it's equally as exhausting to force yourself to shrink yourself to fit an idea that isn't real than it is to put yourself out there and try and fail. And that could be privilege. I'm definitely open to the feedback, but I do think that as we talk about desire and friendship and why people are choosing these things, like, yes, we can point to the men who are talking about, like, I don't want to deal with real women, and so I'm going to do an AI chat box. But also we can talk to people who are just genuinely lonely, who genuinely have not been taught how to care for themselves, who exist in the margins and are just looking for a way to feel good. And it's a reminder of how the failure of society is expansive. And yes, we all have personal responsibility. You shouldn't be using it anyway. All those things can be true. And we are dealing with people who are feeling lonelier, who are feeling more isolated than ever. And we are living through like literally dystopian times. And that we have to get up every day while knowing that, especially if you live in America, that our capital is being used to actively harm people. Like, we have to live in that. And that we have people in this country who are pro that. Like, we have to live in humanity and maintain our own. And that's really fucking difficult. But it is important, and it is good work.
And it's your troubled hero, back for season 6.
Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I have some extra content on my Patreon. I have a review of the drama. I have a review of They Will Kill You. I have some stuff about Hades 2. I have my thoughts on Bridgerton, the first and second parts of season 4. And just having a good old time. So if you have the spoons and if you can, join us. It's a great time. And just thank you for another year. I consider this one of my relationships that I often am thinking about maintaining and caring about. Like, this is a relationship that matters to me. And I don't give you AI slop because you deserve better, because you watch my silly videos, you watch my face, you do all of this labor. And so my response is to do the labor back. And it is not always perfect, but we like to think that we're improving. We like to think that we're getting better, especially with the makeup, right?